تعليم ولا اكو الوضع نفس هذا.
ما يخالف سيدتي.
اختلاف.
سيدتي
لا تربوا اولادكم كما تربيتم لانهم خلقوا في زمان غير زمانكم.
يا سيدتي
تحكي لي.
يا سيدتي انا لا استطيع الان اخطئ رسول الله صلى الله عليه واله وصحبه وسلم. لا مو انت ما يخالف ما يخالف يا سيدتي.
مو لازم انه الرسول تزوج عايش بعمر 9 سنوات.
يا سيدتي بهذا الوصف.
قولوني ما لا اقول
هسه هيك سمعت الشيخ.
يا سيدتي انت غير
خلي نسمع سيدة قمر. تفضل شيخ حداد. تفضل شيخ حداد.
سيدتي خلينا نكمل. هذا احنا اذا صار
تفضل شيخ حداد تفضل. نعم
احنا لو بحلبة مال مصارعة.
لا كمل لي هسه خلينا نترك هذا المهات.
Allowing poor families to marry their daughters off to rich men, they are allowed to not only move their families up the economic ladder, but more specifically, grant their daughters access to education, better food, and a better living standard during the formative years of their lives. The case the women's rights activist seems to make is that the idea of marrying a 9-year-old as if this were the year 650 AD is an extremely antiquated and archaic idea. It may have been a reasonable practice back then, but human beings must adapt to the times. We live in an advanced technological society. Not only do we now have the means of controlling reproduction and whether or not a human gets pregnant or not, but limiting the ability of women in such a drastic way raises a serious question regarding their human rights. Can a woman truly be considered free if all her life she was forced to obey the whims of those around her? In addition to this, reducing the age of marriage from 15 to 9, the Iraqi government also legalized a form of temporary marriage commonly found in Iran, wherein men are allowed to create a temporary marriage and engage in sexual intercourse with a woman, a form of loophole in Islamic law. Fundamentally, this system seems to be unfair and unjust. The Muslim marriage system seems to have the opposite problem as the American one. While the American marriage and divorce system is almost explicitly gynocentric in its application and makes almost no pretense of hiding this fact, the Muslim marriage and divorce system is perhaps much more dangerous because it operates on divinely inspired law which can never be changed, is eternally true, and without error. The truth of the matter is that any society or system that is completely dominated by either gender is corrupt. The problem I have with the women's rights activist is that she fundamentally believes things should come free to women and at the disadvantage of men. She wants women to have all the advantages of better living standards and a higher quality of life, paid for by a majority male taxpayer base and with no reciprocity. The problem with the Iraqi government is pretty obvious. Marrying a 15-year-old, let alone a 9-year-old, opens up the child to a whole host of potential problems, from sexual and physical abuse to abandonment and neglect. Muslims need to create a system wherein minor marriage is temporary. Say a woman is temporarily married to a man at the age of 9 by her parents. She should then also be allowed to divorce that man with no consequence to her or to him at the age of 18 if she so chooses. In this way, the marriage can act as a form of apprenticeship, wherein a woman is not only gaining all the benefits of a higher living standard, but is also well prepared for marriage either later on in life or to someone she finds more suitable as a partner. In such a marriage, sexual intercourse should probably be strictly prohibited until the age of 18. A violation of this, followed by a subsequent divorce at the age of 18, should open the woman's former husband up to a form of economic sanction. The woman should be financially compensated for her loss in perceived sexual integrity, as this could go on to affect her ability to find a spouse later on in life. And obviously, sexual intercourse between the age of consent, sexual intercourse before the age of consent, which should range between the age of 15 to the age of 18, should be strictly prohibited and should carry legal and financial sanctions. The reality of the situation is, people change, circumstances change. Her parents might have thought marrying her off at the time was a good idea, but it could have been seen as a way of keeping her out of trouble and of escaping poverty. The inherent problem with the situation is that the child's consent wasn't taken into account. 9 is hardly an age for a woman to give consent, especially for such a serious decision as marriage, which can last the majority, if not all, of one's life, and especially in a culture such as Islamic cultures, where husbands are perceived to have an undue amount of influence and sway over what a woman can and can't do with their body and with their life. This also raises the valuable question of why women are not allowed to marry boys at the age of 9. If the law allows such a practice for men to marry at the age of 9, why don't women's rights activists try to position marriage laws to better equip them? After all, if a woman were to marry the child of 2 highly intelligent athletes at the age of 9, this could open her up to a whole host of positive benefits. A young, successful woman who marries an athlete might better position herself to achieve in life. She may also be able to live the dream of feminists of being an older, successful woman married to a fit, charming, and attractive man. Furthermore, if Iraqi law is to be structured to allow men to engage in sexual intercourse with temporary marriages, women's rights activists should demand the same right for women. After all, it is much easier for a woman to gain access to sex than men. It would actually benefit them more than it does the men demanding the reforms. All of this goes back to why I believe adopting strictly orthodox views on issues is almost always entirely wrong. Orthodoxy is almost never correct because it is adopted by people who miss the nuances in life. This is why all orthodox positions are fundamentally corrupt, because not all people and situations are the same. Circumstances change, time and chance always play a role in how events in life develop. The idea that human beings should live in the way we lived 1,000 years ago, or even 500 years ago, before the Industrial Revolution is absurd. The Industrial Revolution has fundamentally altered the way in which human beings interact with the world and with each other, and in ways most of us still do not completely understand. With that being said, the fact that we don't completely understand something doesn't then somehow deny society permission to experiment with policy changes that better reflect a changing world. Rather than adopting the policies of the West, which seem to be just as bad, if not worse, than those in Middle Eastern countries such as Iraq, Iraqis should structure their laws in ways that not only adapts to the modern world, but maintains their traditions. Human societies are not static, they are dynamic. Rather than their society decaying due to westernization, Iraq could also face the possibility of their society dying due to tradition and superstition. The past was a bad place. That's why we left it behind. The idea that mankind should turn back the pendulum to a time before the advent of the steam engine is not only dangerous to human development, but to the human spirit. Modern life affords us with many benefits we take for granted, not only materially, but emotionally and metaphysically as well. Islamic law and philosophy should reflect the changes to metaphysics introduced to the human experience by virtue of the rapid technological change that fundamentally altered the way in which human beings interact with the world. Both sides have a point as to why things should be the way they envision them to be. The problem arises when people believe it has to be a zero-sum game wherein only one side benefits.